We're here today, Amy and myself are here today to talk to you about the revolution we're trying to lead to improve market research across the industry. I appreciate it's perhaps a somewhat nerdy topic, but I think hopefully by the end of this presentation you'll realize how important this topic is. Anyone who has conducted a piece of research probably recognizes that there can be some big gaps between what respondents say in the survey and what we know to be the truth. And the whole marketing and advertising industry is reliant on answers from market research surveys to make some really quite big decisions. Now, on the surface of it, the reasons for this are often laid down to bad respondents or biased questions. And for sure, there are bad respondents taking surveys. We're actually facing increasing battles to tackle this with fake panelists and bots and so on, ghost respondents, people lying when they take the screening question. I like to think we've got some of the best, at Kantar, we've got some of the best fraud detection protocols in the whole industry. But it's a running battle. Machine learning is really taking hold of the way that we can spot fraudulent behavior, but it's also enabling people to battle the systems themselves. Anywhere up to 20 or 30% of people trying to do a survey may not be who we think they are. Our fraud detection is pretty good, but there's clearly going to be some people that we don't pick up on, maybe a few percentage necessarily who we think they are. And sure, question bias is a really big problem. Anyone that learns market research will learn about, how to ask a question in a neutral, clear way to ensure that we're not biasing the people in the way that they answer the questions. But how much of bad data is caused by the very boring way that we write surveys? And that's the topic we want to talk to you about today.
It's time that we start thinking about the very humorless and very serious language and kind of tone of voice that we use in the surveys that we're writing today, and the impact that they have on our respondents' ability to engage with the surveys and the questions that we're asking them. Because in our efforts to create something that is very unbiased and unambiguous, we can end up writing surveys that read a little bit like a legal document. For example, this question here. There's nothing technically wrong with it, but it's not really very natural language. It's not the sort of conversational thing that people are really going to click with and engage with. Or we have this question here. In an effort to avoid using the phrase fast food so as not to bias respondents against it, we have ended up with an explanation that is so long and convoluted that you end up with a big chunk of respondents who have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, so can't answer the question accurately, or are so completely bored by the incredibly long description, they've switched off and have clicked any old answer to just get to the next question. Survey experiences themselves can be incredibly uninviting. Now, we live in a world where visual content is constantly on the rise. We need to be aware of the economics of attention in order to make sure that we're getting the most from our respondents. The surveys that we send to our respondents say a lot about the people who are writing them kind of behind the scenes. And unfortunately, this is how, at the far end of the scale, market researchers are seen. We're just a little bit dull. And for better or for worse, you can throw in a little bit of annoying or serious or fastidious. That's not where we want to be. We want to be at the other end of the scale. We want to be by the best friend area, the funny, trustworthy person, the person that you choose to spend your time with, and the person that you tell your experiences to. Unfortunately, if you ask generative AI to create a picture of a market researcher, you might end up with something a little bit like this. John, that's not what we're like.
Yes, I'm afraid we'd rather come across as sort of goody-goody and earnest. And so we asked people what they thought of market researchers and their lifestyle. We asked them, would market researchers vote? And everyone thinks we're the type of people who vote. We asked them, would we recycle? And think, well, yeah, we're the type of people who recycle. Do we have a degree? Yeah, they'd probably assume that we have a degree. And we asked what they watch on television. They think that market researchers watch news and documentary programs. What that means is that the people that we're talking to just don't feel connected to us. We asked, who would you like to invite to a dinner party? Unfortunately, we came down, well, I'm glad we're not marketing executives, that's perhaps what I can say. And now, when people read our surveys, they potentially start mirroring the person they think they're talking to. It's a very common phenomenon. That we reflect back to people in a way that we think that we're expected upon us. And so when we ask people, do you vote or do you recycle, do you have to, more people feel the need to say those things to us because that's what they expect us to want to hear, because they think of us being very earnest and serious, so their answers have to be earnest and serious. So when you ask, what do you watch on television, a lot more people claim to be watching documentaries and news than actually what we know in reality. So, is it me or you? I would ask you, how much bad data is caused by respondents not feeling at ease or comfortable telling us the truth in a survey?
We're here to show you the impact that an Oliver shift in tone can have on the quality of your research data. In other words, making your surveys less dull. So here's a really exciting case study that we worked on earlier in the year. We were looking at the impact of the cost of living crisis on the way that people look after their pets. And we asked the question, are your pets' vaccinations up to date? 94% of respondents said yes. That's a really high number, and to be honest, that's a little bit higher than we expected. So we tried something a little bit different. First of all, we changed the tone of the question. We removed the judgment or any sense of judgment from the question. We basically laid it out. We said, look, everybody's got a to-do list. We all have things that we've gotten to and things that we haven't. We're all human. And then we added a little bit of humor around that kind of idea. And by adding humor, you're making that kind of bond. You're changing the dynamic of the way that you engage with the respondent. You're moving it from that far end, a little bit annoying market researcher, to the fun, trustworthy, best friend that you confide in sort of side of things. And then we start with the confessions. So you start off with some questions that are really kind of easy to admit to having not gotten to yet. You throw in a few things that people can say, yay, I've done that, I've ticked that off my list. And then you hit them with the questions that are a little bit harder to admit to. And what we found by doing that is the percentage of people who admitted to not having their pets' vaccinations up to date went from 6% all the way up to 40%.
Now, you know, we have some big challenges in market research to map out consumer behavior. And sustainability is one of probably the biggest ones, and we run a sustainability practice. One of the key challenges we have is getting a reliable read on what people really think about the environment and their attitudes towards things like recycling, because everyone tells us that they recycle. So again, here's a lovely example of just adding, we grabbed these memes off the web, adding some free content to humanize the experience for people, to sort of present the other perspective on things. Adding this little video with this woman failing to throw the rubbish in the bin, with a narrative around, you know, sometimes life gets in the way of us being sustainable, allowed people to be a lot more honest in their real attitudes and behaviors about sustainability. These are some comparisons. We went from 1% of people admitting to never recycling up to 27% of people with that form of more sort of open, friendly approach to questionnaire design. A simple question like, did you vote in the general election? 80% of panelists tell us they vote. Adding a little picture, this is someone having a confession, and a little narrative around, you know, challenging people to admit the truth. We go from 80 down to 60%, which is pretty much close to what the number of people voting in reality. So, over to Amy.
So it's not all about just adding a little bit of fun to your surveys to make them less dull. It's also about adding a little bit of empathy, making it more relatable to the people that you're talking to, and thinking about the questions that you're asking from the perspective of all of the different people that you're hearing from. So this is my favorite question. What is your highest level of education? So this is a really important question in market research. It's asked a lot, and unfortunately, it is absolutely riddled with judgment and rife with overclaim. So you look at the question, first of all, the wording, what is your highest level of education? There's a big implication in the way that you're asking this, that higher is better, and that education is the thing that you should strive for, and other options are not valid. And then you look at the other options, and you see all these different types of education, and what if you didn't do this? What if you pursued your dreams in some other way? Oh, well, that's other none of these at the very bottom. So a lot of people feel a little bit pressured to kind of massage the truth in these responses. So what we like to do is to take the judgment out of the question. And instead of saying, what is your highest level of education? What did you do after leaving school? And present a variety of different ways that people have pursued their dreams and gone on to other things. And then, if that person did go on to complete extra education or extra training, then you go on and say, what type, not what's the highest level, but what type of further education did you undertake? And again, not everybody finishes school and then goes on to further education. Some people do it later in life. So of course, you follow up with the other options as well. Have you undertaken any education later in life? So it's kind of making space for lots of different life opportunities and lots of different life experiences. What we found that when we do this, again, there's a significant drop in the level of overclaim of higher education attainment. And this is something that you can apply to the most simple questions as well. It's all about mitigating for human nature. Life isn't always black and white. And so that means that a yes or a no response isn't always going to connect with your respondents. Even with something as simple as, do you have a pet? Life can be complicated sometimes. Maybe their definition of having a pet is a little bit different from just a yes or a no. Maybe their parents had a pet and they've moved out of house. Maybe their ex has the pet now and they share it. Maybe they share the pet as part of like an online community. So if you add room for that kind of gray area in life, again, you find that the number of people who claim that they have a pet goes down and you get closer to the real experience.
From all the research we've done, I think the biggest cause of bad data from market research is bored and frustrated respondents. We tend to focus on what we want to know. We're not really thinking about what it feels like to answer these sorts of questions we ask them. We're often asking unfathomable questions or survey stuff with agreement scales, loops of questions over and over again that people find frustrating to answer, annoying memory recall tasks. And I'm afraid to say this is having an impact on the respondent, a global impact on the respondent. I've been testing out trap questions in surveys for over 20 years. In 2002, 12% of people failed this basic trap question in the Likert agreement scale. Last year, I tested it out, 25% fails it. That's a scarily big number to contend with, 25% of data not being people not considering their answers properly. We're seeing this growing challenge with repetition fatigue and memory recall. We're finding anywhere up to, in a place like China, anywhere up to 40% people are aware of fake brands and brands that don't exist. A typical ad is generating now 20% passive recall, whether they've seen it or not. These are big challenges going on in our industry.
So what this means is that there is a quiet rebellion brewing amongst our respondents. They have become very savvy to the questions that we're asking and the way that we're asking them, and they are rebelling against the boring Likert scales, the repetitive questions, the endless and impossible memory recall challenges, and they are demanding something more for their time. So in addition to changing the tone of our language that we use in surveys, let's add something a little bit more visual and something a little bit more exciting. Pictures are an incredibly effective way of making something more immediate. They can illustrate the options that you're giving to your respondents. They can bring them to that point in time that you're asking them to recall. Icons can be just as effective at kind of illustrating your options. They can really spice up that boring Likert scale. There are lots of options available to you. You can also just change the way that you present the questions that you're asking in the survey. There are lots of different options you can choose from, a scrolling matrix, a hybrid drag and drop, an animated slider. Just mix things up, change things up a bit. Talk about changing things up. Try asking the questions that you're asking as a part of a quiz and giving some positive feedback when they get the right answer. What we found is that when respondents are playing a game and looking for that right response, they pay more attention. And when respondents are paying more attention, you get an answer that is closer to the truth.
You may not like the answer, but we would get you closer, hopefully, with that approach. I think our viewpoint on making surveys is to think more holistically about the experience, the narrative structure. We've got a wonderful case study of some work with the BBC we did to revamp their global news tracker, which is well worth reading. And we have several papers and presentations on this topic, how to spice up your surveys. So we've run out of time. I just want to say, if you want to join the fight against dull surveys, the team of Kantar profiles are standing at the back. You get a free badge to go to chat to them. Thank you very much for your time.